Hey everyone, Nick the Record Lover here. It's Thursday night. It's December 7th, 2023. Tonight we're going to talk about one of the most underrated albums ever, and it's become one of my favorites. Smiley Smile by the Beach Boys. It came out in September of 1967 on Brother Records. That was their first album to be on that label because that was their own label. It came out in mono and stereo, T9001 for mono and ST9001 for stereo. I do have a dual phonic. It really is dual phonic ST9001. It wasn't true stereo until they just released the CD a few years back of the mono and the stereo versions of the album. And I also have here, which is pretty cool, but I actually got to find this 1974 two for LP of their 1967 album Smiley Smile and their 1968 album Friends. Now, in 1971, the Beach Boys had a concert, and I've actually heard an audio of it. And before they do the song Vegetables, which you can hear in the background if you can listen, uh, off of Smiley Smile, Bruce Johnson actually says, "You can't get this album anymore," because by 1971, it was out of print. But Brother Records and Warner Brothers got together and put together these two albums, Friends and Smiley Smile, as well as two other albums on Capitol Records that were out of print called 2020 and Wild Honey. Wild Honey was released in 67, 2020 was released in 1969. So these are the albums they got back from Brother and Capitol. So and these are actually promo copies. This is a has a promo sticker on it, and this is the Smiley Smile LP. It's a promo copy, if you can see that. This is side one, and here's side two. Now you're hearing Fall Breaks and Back to Winter. I'll go through a track by track annotation right now. This is the 1980 copy of Smiley Smile on Capitol Records. It was originally released on Brother in the United States, and Capitol Records distributed that. It was Brother Records, their own label, before they merged with Warner Brothers in 1969. This is the 1980 reissue in mono. It's very hard to find an original mono on Brother Records. Well, not that hard, but it goes for a lot of money. And they have reissued it on Analog Productions. And they have like 180 gram vinyl or 200 gram vinyl of it. It's like $40, $50. But this is the original mono mix on this album that came out originally in 1967. And the mono copy has the full picture. Actually, if you could see right at the bottom there, every animal on this, every creature on this album is smiling, even the house that it comes from. And the smoke is actually coming out, forming the words Smiley Smile and the Beach Boys. You could see a little worm at the bottom, the red worm that's right where my finger is. And on the stereo copy, it's cropped. So you don't see the worm on the bottom. But that's how it was on the original mono LP, both the Brother Records and the Capitol reissue. The Capitol reissue was also on the green label, a dark green label in 1980 when they started reissuing the Beach Boys albums again. Some Beach Boys albums that they re-released in 1980 had cuts taken off, had two cuts taken off, but Smiley Smile was re-released in its entirety. And just to go through a track by track, well, let me give you a little history on how I heard this album. In 1986, I was looking for this album like you wouldn't believe because I was becoming a really big Beach Boys collector at the time. And in 1986, I found out about this record. I saw it in the store. I saw this copy, and I was like, I want to get the original copy on Capitol Records. Was there original on Capitol Records? There was a copy released on Capitol Records in 1968 on the Capitol Rainbow label or the Capitol Lime Green label. That one has been so hard to find. I've never gotten a copy of that yet. But then I realized the original was on Brother Records. So I did get a copy. I belonged to the Beach Boys fan club at the time. It was called Beach Boys Freaks United. So I went through the want ads through the fan club and found out a gentleman's named Dave Schechter who had the album, and I wrote to him, and he had it sealed. Okay, and it was $20, I think. And I asked if he could go down a little bit. He said the best he could have gone down was to $17, including postage. So it was like maybe $19 or $18, and he went down. He went out down a dollar because the stereo, that one, was very hard to get sealed, and it was an original from the batch that came out in September of 1967, and the album only charted at number 41. Well, only 41. I mean, it made the top 50 because the history behind this album was they had an album out called, they were going to put out an album called Smile. And it was supposed to be this big production and different versions of the songs on the album. Supposed to come out at the end of 1966 and make a big splash. And there's been so many questions as to would Smile be a big rival to Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, or would Smile be like the biggest thing since sliced bread? We don't know because they did re-release the Smile material, or most of the Smile material, back in 2011. I do have the box set, and the tracks all sound great, and they're all different. Now, some call this like a watered down ish release of Smile. And Carl Wilson has said that this album was a bunt instead of a grand slam. But since I've listened to it over the years, I've enjoyed it. In fact, I've started to love it much more now. In 1986, when I first heard it, it wasn't my copy that I heard. It was a classmates at school in sophomore year, junior year of high school. And my friend said to me, "My father's got this album." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "He's got it on the Capitol Rainbow label." I said, "Wow." He said, "I'll let you borrow it. I'll ask my dad." I said, "Okay." So I did get it, and I did listen to it. And I except for Heroes and Villains and Good Vibrations, which Heroes and Villains starts off in side one and Good Vibrations starts off side two, the other tracks were weird. That's how I could explain it at the time. Weird, but not bad in any sense of the word. I just thought Vegetables was wow. If you've brought a big brown bag of them home, I'll jump up and down and hope you toss me a carrot. It's like this is bordering on silly, but bordering on good silly. Like they were just having fun in the studio, and maybe a little bit of hidden substances here and there, but who cares? Little Pad is playing right now. I think the Beach Boys having a good time and having fun. That's the most important thing. They came out of the whole Smile era because Brian Wilson was getting burned out from the whole idea. All of the pressure from Capitol Records. Capitol Records pressed up 500,000 copies of that cover for Smile, but they never got the record because they never finished it. But on the Smile box set, there was a lot of material that was finished and was released finally. Okay. But what was released to the public was a different version of Heroes and Villains. It was just the single version that came out in July of 1967, and it made the top 20. It made it to number 13 on the top 20. And for what this album is, a lot of people think that it gets a bad rap. I do too. I think it's an underrated record. You have great tracks on here. You have Heroes and Villains, which is with their big single of 1967, which is one of my favorites. I remember hearing that song off of the Beach Boys' 20 Golden Greats. That's how I learned about the later material that they had, like Darlin', Heroes and Villains, Do It Again, stuff like that, Breakaway. But then I finally found this. But I bought this reissue many years later because I didn't want. When I called up the stores and said, "Do you have Smiley Smile on Capitol Records?" and they said yes, they said it's the same record, it's just reissued. Well, that wasn't good enough for me at the time. I wanted the original one, so I bought the original one, and I had it sealed, and it was sealed from 1967. It was an original from the original batch, the early pressings, because the later pressings said title for this album by Barry Turnbull. The early copies didn't say that. It didn't say title for this album by Barry Turnbull. The later 67 copies that came out, and even in 68, it said it. So you have the song Vegetables, which is a great little tune. And they're actually chewing vegetables in the song. They're chomping on celery. And who else is chomping on celery with the Beach Boys but Sir Paul McCartney? He just hung out at the sessions. Some people say he actually produced the song, but it was just he just stopped by just to see what they were doing while Sergeant Pepper's was going on at the time. So then you have Fall Breaks in Back to Winter, which is it says in parentheses the Woody Woodpecker Symphony. Okay, so Fall Breaks in Back to Winter, you hear like a peck of a wood of like a woodpecker on wood, and then just a lot of voices on it, not really any lyrics on it, and then you hear like a squeeze box play the Woody Woodpecker theme. Now, to me, that's you don't have to be like, oh my God, creative for that, for it to be genius. Who else could do this? Really? You know, but that's a great tune, and it's great in mono and in stereo on the CD here, the mono stereo reissue. You can hear the pecking on both sides of the channels. In the mono one, of course, everything comes out on one channel. All the music comes out. Well, they come out of two speakers, but it's the same music. It's all one channel. So then we have "She's Going Bald," which originally was a song called "He Gives Speeches," which was much faster. But "She's Going Bald" is about a girl losing her hair. And it was also suggested that it was about something else that, for family purposes, I can't say. But it gets sped up, and then it gets slowed down, and then it's just like a whole big comedy thing. Which what they wanted Smile to be some kind of a comedic thing too, but this is more comedic than Smile is. So she's going bald, and that has Mike on features the group. Um, Little Pad features Carl. Heroes and Villains has Brian. Vegetables features everybody. Fall Breaks and Back to Winter, the Woody Woodpecker Symphony, is the instrumental. Good Vibrations is featuring Carl, but it's the original single of Good Vibrations. They actually might have toyed with the idea of using the organ that is the basic instrument on this album to redo the songs, to redo Heroes and Villains, to redo Good Vibrations. But they did use the single versions to open up both sides of the albums. So then we have "With Me Tonight," which is playing right now. It's a great a cappella song. Just them around the piano, just harmonizing. And we have "Wind Chimes," which was much different on the Smile album. "Wind Chimes" is much more like a how do I describe it? It's a hazy, hot, and humid kind of song. That's why I call this Beach Boys album a hazy, hot, and humid album, even though this is December. So it's one of my favorites. But a really big bang on this record is "Getting Hungry," which was released as a single in 1967 under the names Brian Wilson and Mike Love. It wasn't released as a Beach Boys single. It was released as Brian Wilson and Mike Love singing "Getting Hungry," even though it's the whole group. And then we have "Wonderful," which is a different version from these Smile sessions, but it's very, very like, soft, like a lullaby. It's just very like a just cool out kind of record. I mean, you could smile when you hear it. I mean, that's a Smiley Smile idea. So, and then finally, after Wonderful, we have Whistle In, which is a great song to end it, to fade it out with. Remember the day, remember the night, all day long, whistle in. Remember the day, remember the night, all day long, all of the night. So I give this album, I really like it. I mean, there are many different videos on here of people talking about Smiley Smile, but they have their opinions. And I said that Getting Hungry is probably my favorite on the album. And a person replied saying, I could see it as a good song, but not as anyone's favorite. Well, that's my favorite on the album. I love it. You know, uh, Wind Chimes actually wound up as the single, as a flip side of the single to the Capitol Records 45 Wild Honey that the Beach Boys released in 1967. So this album was produced by the Beach Boys, and where it was usually produced, all the albums produced were usually Brian Wilson, but this was actually a group effort, and they just hung around on the organ and just did a whole smooth kind of album. So it's one of my favorite albums. In fact, it's becoming very up there with Summer Days and Summer Nights. That's really, I think, their best album. While they were still doing the surf girls, but more of a grown-up album, like, so Summer Days and Summer Nights was. That had California Girls, Let 'Em Run Wild, Amusement Parks USA. But this is the Beach Boys, and they never made a record like this again. The next album after this was Wild Honey, which was more of an R&B kind of album, and that was a really good record too. And Smiley Smile, I would say, was more of a get back to basics kind of record too, as well as Wild Honey was, because many people say that Bob Dylan's John Wesley Harding might have been the first get back to basics after everybody went through the whole psychedelic, dreamy period, and he was just getting back to basics with that record. But Smiley Smile is a very simply made album. So this is the Capitol Records mono reissue. And on the back, you have the back. Originally, the album on Brother was all green in the background, and the front had the green on the borders on the side and on the top. Um, but the mono mix is really good. But I really like the way that they did the stereo mix on this album, because it's really duophonic stereo. If you listen to the stereo version, even that's on the Beach Boys Friends, or on the Brother Records one that I have, the ST9001. A friend of mine at the time, a good friend of mine at the time, still is, from high school, said, he was getting hungry, said that maybe you should have left the record sealed and bought the cassette tape, because they did have the cassette tapes out at that time. I remember going into Record Town and seeing the Beach Boys cassettes, Smiley Smile, Wild Honey, Surfing USA, Surfer Girl. And I was just going for the albums at the time, so I didn't think of leaving it sealed and buying the cassette tape, especially after I spent the money on the record. It's like, I want to hear the record if I'm playing, if I want to know what it is, I want to play it. So, Smiley Smile, the Beach Boys. What are your thoughts? Did you like this record? If you had it when it came out, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this record. Did you like it? Did you think it was just a watered down version of Smile? Let me know. I'll read all the comments. And it's good to talk to you guys on this Thursday night about Smiley Smile, the Beach Boys, the reissue on Capitol Records, and the reissue on the Friends and Smiley Smile album. So this is Nick, the record lover, here, signing off. A whisper of the word will let you soar with your soul, and the smile that you send out returns to you. Have a great night. Peace.